All right. Once we go live, I'll share it up.
Let's see.
In
a world where we hope things work.
Yeah. So for any of you guys that are coming into the channel here in just a second, we are testing this out to see if it's working.
We've got different camera angles, different things we do to make it beautiful for everyone.
Up on mine.
Well, maybe it should be. Give it a second. You should probably hit stream, possibly. There it goes. You're there.
We're on?
It says Jiu-Jitsu is live.
Okay.
What's going on, everybody? This is episode 86 of the Chewjitsu Podcast. So we're doing something a little different. We're still working on getting things going a little better, improving the quality of the stream and doing some different camera angles. And
it says live now. Okay, so what do I need to do to share this?
So you'll have a little
just turn your sound off on there.
And then take that link, copy it. Boom, you got the link and you can paste it wherever you want to.
Just turn your sound off. Yeah.
I can't even see it in mine. So it works for him, but it doesn't work for me.
It's working right now?
All right.
Well, we'll get started. And if anybody, Chewy, if you hear anybody messaging you any fun stuff, let us know.
Cool.
But we have Chris Sizemore today. Chris is a police officer in Lexington, Kentucky. And surprisingly enough, he is Chewy's last MMA fight. Actually, you guys were each other's last MMA fight.
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
God, it's so crazy. It was that long ago. God bless. Yeah, so we fought in 2012.
Yeah.
And, it was he was one of the few, like, guys. I don't know about you. When I was fighting back in the day, it was like you would have – it was like maybe for every, like, 5 fights you had – one person would be kind of a sportsman, and the other 4 would be kind of turd burgers that would just like want to like, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, I remember there was one guy that I was fighting, and he was like, my very first professional fight was ridiculous. Anyway, I remember it was at a casino, and I get there for the weigh-ins, and walk up and I see my opponent. I see him. I don't know him from anyone. I saw like his name and stuff, and they weighed us in. And I came up to him. I was like, "Hey, Marcus, nice to meet you, brother." And I just extended my hand as a handshake, right? Mm-hmm. And he just looked at me, and like he didn't extend his hand. He just puffed his chest up, and I was like, "Marcus, right?" And he nods at me like this, doesn't say a word. He's like, I'm like,
"We'll mess you up."
I was like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
Did you air shake? Did you air shake?
Well, I air shake because I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, we get paid money to do this. We're not fighting for like this isn't the street, right? So I was just like, I'll see you tomorrow.
How did that work out for him?
Well, yeah, what was funny was during the fight. So if you go back and watch what remnants of like my fights are on the line. There were 2 people that would fight. There would be the Chewy that was like very angry, would just run across the ring at people, and there was the other guy where we touch gloves and we'll fight. And the guy that would run across the ring was always against a guy who had like been rude to me before, and I was just like, I want to hurt him. You know what I mean? Whereas otherwise it was like a sportsmanly contest, right? With Chris, straight up, like normal guy, very respectful. I remember we were like talking, the day before, and then we go out the next day, we beat the crap out of each other. But we're sportsmen. But before that, dude, I was actually.
Was that the casino? When was that?
That was the casino.
God,
and as I'm hitting,
I told him about that story right before.
I was hitting him, cussing at him. I was like, "Shake my hand now." Like as I'm punching
you
him,
didn't
I'm
just
like,
say
"Shake
that.
my." Huh?
There was no cuss words I just heard. There were.
Well, as I was punching him.
Said, shake my hand now.
Well, there were cuss words in there. There were expletives in there, and I remember my coach was like, "Chewy, stop cussing, just fight." Like just chill out. But I was, I found it very rude because I'm like, man, it was. I expected everybody to be on the same level. Hey, we're professionals and we get paid money, and we don't have to do this. We can just fight, and that can be that. But did you run into that situation?
So my most infamous fight, I guess, aside from you being as popular as you are and people know who you are, my most infamous fight was Percy Hicks in Chicago. And it was for a team tournament. It was like kind of like a dual meet. And it was like our 5 guys versus your 5 guys. Okay. And they did like interviews and all that stuff. And it was a championship. And I was something like 8-1 as an amateur at the time. He was like maybe like 3-2 or something. Yeah. And we did interviews beforehand. And he had all these one-liners like, it's lights out, no mercy from Percy.
I love it. That's good. That's good. I like
when the cage door closes, you're just gonna see blood and all this other stuff, the typical stuff.
Right.
It actually turns out I found out later he was a convict who had put a police officer in the trunk of his car.
Oh wow!
Whoops. Yeah, and served.
This was
8 years.
This was before
we fought.
Oh.
Yeah,
So he had a little pent up rage.
Yeah, and he's probably like 5'6" and just
Oh, this was
yoked.
that short yoke dude. Yes, I remember watching that fight before mine.
And so I go out and fight, and it was a relatively easy. Like, he had no skill whatsoever.
Yeah,
he would just go in, he'd come forward, and he'd just try to throw bombs. So I put him down. I got him in a crucifix, and I start hammer fisting him, and the referee stands us up, and they're like, "You can't hit with the forearm. You can't hit with the forearm."
Forearm?
Yeah.
What?
It was amateur.
Okay,
and
fair
it was
enough.
weird. It was before
okay.
commissions and all this
Yeah,
stuff.
Before commissions.
They just made rules up at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he was a hometown guy. I think they're just giving him a chance.
Right.
Because he was stuck there for a good 30 seconds where I'm just hitting him. So we reset, and I come out, and I jump in the air, and I hit him with a flying knee.
I remember
and just
that one.
Knocked him out for a good 3 minutes.
Flying knee?
Yes.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it was
Amateur
terrible
level.
watching that because that fight was online before we fought, and I was watching. I was like, oh no, I don't want to get hit with one of those. But I remember seeing bits and pieces of that because they had a little bit of the talking going on before. I had a guy similar in my second one where he was running around the audience that day. He showed up late that day, whatever, and he's running around. Just the one-liners weren't quite as thought out as Percy's. He was just screaming like this is Sparta, and he would just run around and he's just loud, right? And it's so funny because it didn't intimidate me because I looked at him and I was like, well, he showed up late, he weighed in today, and he was 205, and he's kind of small. This was when I was about 230, so I'm I'm much bigger than him, and I think I'm all right on this one. But I remember my aunt came to the fight, who was like a second mother. I don't know why she came to the fight, and it's so funny because she heard this chatter from this guy, and so she was kind of intimidated by it. She goes, that's the guy that's fighting. She calls me Noodle. That's my nickname was Nikki Noodle. She's like, that's the guy that's fighting my Noodle. And she was scared, and it's so funny when we have family around. She's like, oh, Nick fought this giant man. And I was like, he was shorter than me. He was this big giant
Was
man.
he wider?
Huh?
Was he bigger?
No, he wasn't. I was bigger in any respect, whatever. It was just more. The only thing that was bigger was his mouth, right? And but I went out there and took him down and choked him in 30
Her
seconds.
perspective is little Nick. I grew up in.
I'm always going to be this little child. Yeah.
So we were, before the podcast, we were talking about we had some guys that came through the gym that want to fight, and we think how nuts are they to just want to fight with even minimal training? And you had
you're talking about the dude that we were talking about earlier where he wanted to fight.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was curious, how much training did you have, Chris, before you fought? And then Chewy, I don't know if we talked. I think you didn't have too much, a couple months, 6 months or something.
For my first fight?
Before you fought, or
no? My first fight, actually, I was supposed to fight about 6 months after I started training jiu-jitsu, and then I got a spider bite, and then after my spider bite, I had meniscus tear. And then, so I was on the shelf for 3 months, and then when I came back, I didn't fight again until for about almost another year. So I didn't fight. I fought right before I got my purple belt the day that I fought.
That's cool.
So it's a blessing, kind of.
Yeah,
that you didn't fight after 6 months.
I think it was probably a good thing because I don't think that. I was the whole reason I got into jiu-jitsu was that I wanted to fight, and I remember meeting up with the promoter and my coach and signing the paperwork. I was like, oh, this is gonna be so cool, And then literally it was 2 weeks before the fight, I literally sent the promoter a picture of this gaping wound because it was a brown recluse bite, and they had to cut it out. Mm-hmm. And so I was I felt bad because I couldn't show up, and I was I sent him a picture, and he was like, oh, okay, it's cool, don't worry about it. But it really was a blessing because then when I fought later on, I was much more prepared. And I think, because if I would have went in there and fought early like that, I would have taken a lot of damage if the guy was remotely decent. Whereas as I got into it, it was especially some of those early amateur fights, I didn't have to take a lot of damage, which is a good thing, because especially for amateur fights, you don't want to get your head knocked in, for no pay, no nothing, just guts and glory.
Chris, how much training did you have?
So when I was 19 when I started training. I'd wrestled since I was a kid, so I at least had a background. But I was 19 when I started training. I was playing college football at the time for a small NAI school. So it was only during off season I could train. So actually during off season I trained to try and prepare for a season, try to get in shape, and I just fell in love with it. And so I continued all 4 years, but that first year I had an off season of training, and then I went and had my full season of football, and then the next off season I took on a fight. And so it was probably a good year before on and off, of course, during football camp and all that kind of stuff, but it was probably a good year before.
So you had how many? You had 9 amateur fights?
I had 12.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then what made you want to, like, as far as you went pro, so obviously you and Chewy fought as pros in Kentucky. You know, there's not really a limit. Some people, you know, have a few fights, some people have a lot. When did you decide, like, hey, I'm ready to do?
So I was on scholarship. So being a scholarship athlete, you cannot get monetary gain from a professional sport. And so at the time, that was in my head the whole time. Is like, okay, as soon as I get the scholarship over, that's when I'm going to turn pro.
Right.
And so my scholarship I graduated was 09, December 09. And then that summer I had scheduled my first pro fight. It was supposed to be a whole deal for HFC. I don't know, Hoosier Fight Club.
Okay.
It was like the third one they'd ever done. They got like 60 now, but it was like the third one they ever done. And it's going to be a huge deal. It's going to be on HD Net and all this stuff. And the guy that I was supposed to fight was the fight right before the co-main event and the main event. And they'd flew guys in for the co-main event and the main event.
Yeah.
And the night of the fight, I'm literally warming up, and I'm like 2 fights away. It hits midnight. They run out of insurance.
Wait, the promoter?
Yes. This is right when...
I don't...
Yes.
Like, who ran out of insurance?
They run out of insurance at midnight. And
so the insurance is like, by on this date at 11:59.
Yes.
Wow.
And so this is right when commissions were just starting to come in.
That
right.
Sucks.
And so Indiana
what
commission
time
was
did they
behind.
start the card?
It started super late.
Oh my gosh.
One of the co-main event, and I forget what his name is, but he's one of Miguel Torres' guys. He had shown up for the fighter meeting like an hour and a half late. And they were waiting on him the whole time because he was the main guy besides whoever they had in the main event. And so they were waiting on him just to get the fighters meeting going. I guess the commission's like, no, he can't start it till he gets here. Can't start it till he gets here. And so, and all the fights went to decisions, of course. And they had 25 fights on the card. So like, I'm 2 fights in, and they come in and they're like, hey, we're skipping to the co-main event. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pouring sweat, like ready to step out there. And then I didn't fight. We opened up a gym and did all this other stuff and business ventures and all this stuff. I didn't fight for 2 years after that.
Wow.
How was that? Like, because for me, like, there was one time where I had a situation where I show up at the venue, and literally as I show up, the promoter comes up to me and says, hey, man, we got a problem. I was like, what do you mean? And he says that the guy that you were supposed to fight, he, quote, unquote, broke his shoulder. And I was like, broke his shoulder? How the hell did he break your shoulder? And then, like, that guy shows up at the fight, and he's just hanging out. He looks fine, but he backed out of the fight. Right. And so, like, I had been training that whole day. I'm like, going through the motions. You're going through those nerves and anxiety. And then, like, it's almost like I didn't get that release. And, man, like, I was so, like, fidgety and like, irritated and whatever. When I got back home, I immediately went to the gym to work out because, like, I had to do something. How did you feel after that where you didn't get, like, where you're all revved up to go, and then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, we're skipping you?
So, yeah, it was a big deal. It was my pro debut, 1. 2, I had paid to do a training camp at Hit Squad in St. Louis when Matt Hughes owned Hit Squad.
Yeah. So
I had spent the last 8 weeks in a dorm in St. Louis just training.
Everything.
Yeah,
wow.
And so, like, I put everything, and this is at the time, I was coming off my amateur career, and it was always like, when you going pro? Well, I can't until I graduate. And so it was just the anticipation for it and all that stuff. And then we get there, and I've been training my butt off, and I'm going up against a good guy, probably the best guy I've ever fought, and it's gonna be a good start to my career, if I can get this win. And then it just gets canceled, and that deflated my sales more than anything.
Yeah.
And you were hyped up. I was more deflated. I didn't fight for 2 years after that.
Wow.
So it definitely derailed me, and was unfortunate circumstances, but it's just the way things work out.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious, like, so you that's your start as to pro fighting. What got you, well, actually, I didn't know, like, your first amateur fight. Did we talk about that yet? What was that like? First off, how did you get into fighting anyway? I'm curious about this because, we come from the same generation, right? Probably grew up watching the UFC, this thing looks cool. What drew you into fighting? How did you even get started with, like, training, and you're in high school or college or whatever, you're like, I want to go do that?
So I was a freshman in college, and I was playing football, and I'm a small college football player. I played outside linebacker.
What position?
Yeah,
outside linebacker. What were you weighing at the time?
Probably 205,
okay.
210.
Yeah.
But like the guys ahead of me are like 225.
Yeah, they're huge.
And they're stud athletes and way better at me at football and anything.
Sure.
But it's the first time in my life that I was sitting on a bench for anything. It's the first time in my life I wasn't the best one of the best guys on the team or the go-to guy. I was a freshman, and so I still had this. I was still going to practice and doing all that stuff, but I had this competitive edge that wasn't getting fulfilled. And I was starting to think like, man, did I make the wrong decision? Should I went and wrestled in college? And it was kind of like weighing down on me. And I'm waiting tables in the off season at Buffalo Wild Wings, and a group of fighters come in. And they sit in, and they're coming in pretty often, but they come in after a fight, and it's basically, if you can think of like your rinky-dink amateur gym, it's these guys that come in, and I get stiffed on a tip.
Oh,
like
no.
I get stiffed
by those guys.
Yeah, they flew in some guy from New Jersey to fight, and the guy from New Jersey, I guess, is a big. I don't even know who he is.
Sure.
Couldn't tell you his name. But he's a big deal. He won his fight, and then he's like, "Yeah, man, I got you. I'll get you after this. Just give me the tip or give me the tab." And then he stiffs me, and they take off. So I'm all pissed off. Well, these guys come back in the next week, and I'm talking to them, and I'm like, "Hey, where's that guy? You guys didn't tip me anything." He's like, "Man, he's from New Jersey, but I tell you what, you can come out and you can come train with me for free." And so it was like, I came in, it was some warehouse in the back. They had a boxing ring set up. It was the head instructor was like a traditional martial artist guy, and there's a bunch of like guys from different backgrounds with really no background.
It's just a big hodgepodge.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
No like substantial background in fighting or any kind of martial art. Just coming in and we just spar.
Yeah.
And like it was hard sparring, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing.
That used to happen here in Louisville. There was a place, Louisville MMA. Eventually, like that name, they actually became like a trained group, and they got pretty good. But it initially started off as a group of dudes that would fight, and they just fought and beat the hell out of each other in the basement of a community center, where like they'd have basketball on the floor. You'd go downstairs, and then you go in there, and I mean literally you would just go downstairs, and they'd have these mats rolled out, and like you would see everything from like they had like guys like my buddy Brent Weedman, who's a hell of a fighter. He ended up fighting for Bellator, was very skilled. To guys that were literally smoking outside, eating fried chicken, then coming down and training, and then you'd have like guys in like ninja boots, tabby shoes. It was everything under the sun, and like you said, it was like everybody's just kind of like collected together, just beating the hell out of each other.
It's exactly that. Like we had high level guys, like one of the guys we trained with, who ended up being my boxing coach later on.
Yeah.
He's fighting in the 155 tournament for bare knuckle.
Oh wow, okay.
And so like day one is me and him,
but that was fun.
And then we had the martial arts guys and all that stuff, and then like you said, just the guys who was like, oh man, I seen UFC once, I'm gonna walk in and give it a try. So yeah, it was a hodgepodge of people and talent, and we didn't know anything at the time, and we all kind of grew up and learned together.
Figured it out,
And so
what, like you were going to school, like you're studying something, right? What were you like, I just want to fight professionally? What did you want to do? Like, what were you studying, and then how did that?
So I didn't realize I was good at fighting until like I trained and that I actually liked it. And so, like I said, I wasn't getting a lot of playing time, and I had like this competitive edge, and it kind of separate me apart from like the other guys on the team. Like we'd party all the time. It was a small college, so like there's no frats. The frats are the football teams,
sure,
and baseball teams, and things like that. So we'd party all the time. And that kind of set me apart from like, oh, he's the fighter. Oh, he's the guy that does this. So like there's this popularity level I was getting that I was loving as a 20-year-old. Like I don't give a crap about it now, but as a 20-year-old, I was loving it. And so I was like, man, I need to take a fight. That would be awesome. And it was awesome. Like my first fight was amazing. I go out, and it lasted about 30 seconds. I took a guy down and ground and pounded him, and you would have thought I'd ran a marathon with how tired I was in 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
But like my whole football team came, and we had just the biggest party I've ever been to afterwards. And it was just so much fun. And I was like, that feeling at the time as a 20-year-old kid, I was like, man, I love this. I want to keep doing it. And then so then I started devoted more time to it. And then instead of gaining weight for football in the off season, I was cutting weight for fighting. So like, it my coach wasn't exactly happy about it, but
did your football get any better? I mean, honestly,
no,
like,
it probably got worse.
Really?
Because
I'm just curious, because you're working on like footwork, you're working on there is definitely cardiovascular component, strength training, some strength. It's very different. But
so I would say the mental side of it, like when I was at football practice, I was thinking about fighting. Right, that's
how you know you're the wrong.
Not even
you're in the wrong.
Right, and at the same time, I'm telling myself I just need to get through college so that I can start this.
That's so crazy.
Illustrious MMA career that I got planned for me. Right, I'm just this immature little 20-year-old who's got these huge dreams, and my mind wasn't there. And like I said, I was small statured. I wasn't putting on weight like everyone was putting 5-10 pounds. I was losing weight. I was getting leaner and more cut, but
Yeah,
the
for
mass
football,
makes
it's
a
not.
difference.
Yeah, you have to be able
Especially
to push
playing
people around.
outside linebacker.
You need some
Hell
mass
yeah.
to run into people with.
Yeah. So you did well in amateur career. You started your pro career, and then tell me about that. You obviously were doing pretty well there as well. And just tell us a little bit about that, and maybe even how you and Chewy met and why that was your last fight.
So, and it's an interesting story. I had gone after my pro debut got canceled. We didn't have a gym anymore. The gym that we were all training out with, it kind of disbanded just because it's just shady MMA politics at the time. So we took all the fighters and we opened up our own gym. And so then I was like, man, I've trained here, and I would travel and train at different, like I said.
Where were you living at the time?
Joliet, Illinois.
Yeah, I know what that is.
Yeah.
I got a buddy out there, lives out there. Yeah.
So that's where I went to college too.
Okay, yeah. So it's like a suburb out of Chicago.
Yeah, it's like 30, 40 minutes south of Chicago.
Yeah.
And so we opened up our own gym, and then that became a business, and it was, and running it, especially in the beginning, it's a hard business.
Yeah, for
the
sure.
number of hours you put in versus what you're getting out of it at the time.
And especially, in the sense that, I'm sure you're probably this way. I was when I first started. We would start gyms, but we had no idea about actually how to run a business. So like if I had to start a gym now, it'd be fine. Like I'd be fine. But like when I started the gym, or when I sort of got into gym business side of stuff, I had no clue what I was doing. I was just like, I love this stuff and I want to train people how to do it. And then it was like, but how do I make money doing this so that I don't have to scrape change off the couch to get gas in my car? But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, we had a group of fighters,
Yeah.
and the first is 3 of us that were like, let's go in this and do this together. And we had a group of fighters, and we sat down, and we had great equipment. The local school gave us wrestling mats, and we built our own cage wall that was really cool looking. And we had all kinds of stuff donated to us. And we were like, okay, to pay rent and pay utilities, we need all these fighters that are already coming to us to just sign up for membership.
And fighters are terrible at paying
Yes,
memberships.
the worst.
They're the worst, dude.
Yeah, that's what I found out. The worst. And so then everything else, anybody else that we add as members is just going to be extra money on top, and that's money that we can invest back in, or we can use to help pay for training or whatever, or put into our pockets.
Yeah.
And that's what we found out is fighters, the ones that we were counting on, this core group of guys that we were counting on, well, this guy had a baby, and this guy got put in jail, and then like this guy's just being lazy, so he's not to come in, and this guy ran into money problems, and so like all these people we were depending on just to meet our bottom dollar and pay our expenses were gone. So then now our new members are coming in. We got to come up with all these different ways to get new members in just to pay the bills, so that we're not paying out of our own pocket to run this business. And so it was a stressful time, and I was too young. I mean, I was 22 maybe at the time to start my own business and think I can run a gym. And I wasn't the head instructor. We had great instructors, but like that wasn't their baby either. The grappling coach we had came out, had his own gym, but he would just travel 45 minutes and come twice a week and train us, and we'd have to pay him too. And so it was hard. And then at the end of that, then I started thinking, okay, I need to get a real job. And then I start putting in for police departments. And at the same time as I'm putting in for police departments, I'm like, let me give this fighting thing one more go. And so that's when I did my pro debut.
Yeah.
I fought in Puerto Rico.
Oh, that's cool.
And this is how it kind of ties into how I fought Chewy, because it was a Puerto Rico versus like United States. Like that's how they set it up. The promoter set it up.
Yeah,
even though Puerto
cool
Rico's
show.
a part of the United States, so it didn't really make sense. But I'd been to Puerto Rico a couple times before for training.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my boxing coach actually lives out there, and so I actually went and did training camps out there in Puerto Rico. So they knew me, and so they flew me out, and then I was staying in a hotel, and in the hotel was Team USA with me, and so I meet Chris Griffin, Rob Moore, Chris Biddle, and then they had a guy from New York that was there.
Yeah.
And so I meet, and we're Team USA. And so that was my introduction. I didn't know those guys or anything. And they're like, yeah, I'm from Louisville, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, and I have a lot of family in Kentucky. So I said, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. And so I fight with those guys. We do really well. And we come back, and then I get contacted by Chris Biddle. I don't know if you know Chris.
I know
Biddle.
Chris, yeah.
Yeah. So he was supposed to fight you, I think.
I think that they kind of talked about it, but like they never really, they never asked me to fight him.
Sure. So that's because you fought me, is what I think. Because he had contacted me, and I told him, man, I'd love to fight in Kentucky. I got family out there. I'd love to see him. And he's like, well, there's this guy. It's going to be at 205 or 185, but I'm supposed to fight him. If you don't fight him, or you don't think you want to fight him, I'll fight him. And then that was you. And it wasn't Chewy. It was Nick Albin.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's before social media is all huge.
Yeah. I was still Chewy then, but like to the world at large, I was Nick Alvin. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. And so he's like, "Would you be interested in fighting him?" I was like, well, "I was a 70-pounder, but I had fought at 85, and I felt comfortable against bigger opponents with my background and my style. I felt comfortable, and a lot of my training partners are bigger too. So I took that fight, and that's how I ended up in Louisville."
Yeah. So that you guys fought. How did that fight go? I know Chewy, you won, but I don't know. I don't remember exactly.
So the first round, I would say Chris won the first round because he pinned me up against the cage pretty well, and we exchanged some shots and stuff like that. And then the second round, I was able to get it down to the ground. I was able to. It's like the very last minute, the very end. I got a north-south choke. Yeah. But along the way, we both beat the snot out of each other. It's so funny because we were talking about it, and like I was telling him that at one point he hit. So when I was watching your fight in Puerto Rico, you hit the guy with some pretty good shots on the feet, and he had a good right, good overhand right, if I'm correct, right? So he throws overhand right. Well, during the fight, I got hit, and like I had this point where it was almost like as if I closed my eyes and then like woke up 2 steps back, and I was like, oh shit, like that wasn't good. I was like, I need to like keep my hands up and like swing back, because otherwise a couple of those is gonna be bad. And he hit me with one really good shot to the liver, and again, it was one of those things because he went up high and then he came down low and boom, right into it. And again, during the fight, I was able to like keep moving. Yeah. But man, afterwards, I remember like it's so funny because later that night we had a big party. We used to have a bar right next to this gym, and so afterwards, like everybody went to we rented out the Mexican restaurant right across the street. Everybody got drunk, ate a bunch of food. Then we went up and partied over there, and then I waddled over here drunkenly into the back and just fell asleep on some mats. The next morning, I woke up and I was like my friggin' like side was sore from getting hit, and I was just like my head was like, oh my god, I feel terrible, But it's so funny because you get into a fight, and like you said, you were talking about your first fight. You go in 30 seconds and somehow you're exhausted, and then if you go into a fight that's like 1 or 2 rounds like that one was, it's like you take so much more punishment than what you think. After the next day you wake up, you're like, oh my god, you've been in a car wreck.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine how your body, especially when you get older, like just how much of a toll it takes. Like a lot of the fighters say, like if you get in these battles, it just kind of like zaps, like
a little bit of you is still there.
A little bit of you's gone, and I'm like, that's just so crazy.
Well, you think about your body. Your body's a finite resource, right? So every time you use it, a little bit gets taken away. Yeah. You may not feel it now, but it's there, right? Later on, you're going to feel it,
and you can still function at that high level, but eventually.
And see, this is something that most people don't even appreciate because just like you're talking about with your old gym, first off, had no clue what you were doing training-wise. What are we going to do? We got to just train, so we're going to beat the hell out of each other. Great way to train, obviously. We know this now, right? Fantastic way to train. Just bust out your brain cells. And then, like, no equipment, no real training partners, none of that stuff. It's something where, people will walk into, say, our gym, which is a pretty nice gym, and they'll look at it and like, oh, that's cool. They're like watching online.
You expect it.
Well, yeah, it's like they expect to see this, which is like, again, coming from people like us that came from those like, places where you would train wherever the heck you could find something, man, it's a completely different situation.
Well, yeah, like you didn't really have any kind of structure. And then if you're trying to start a business or run your gym, you're just like, you're so worried about training or trying to figure out people to train with and, and then planning on fighting. I mean, it's just like, and then it's
so my thing is I would travel, and what I do, and it was immaturity at the time, but I travel, and then whatever, I went and did a training camp in Boston.
Yeah.
So you had to hong Mark Delgrati and did that training camp. And then I'd come back and I'd say, okay, I have all this knowledge now, even though I'm only bringing like a small bit of that knowledge that I got in training out there. And I came back and I was like, I'll just share it with these guys.
Yeah.
And we would think that was enough. And so then I'd go down to St. Louis and train at Hit Squad. And like I'd bring back like a very small fraction of what I learned and share it, be able to share it and retain it. And it was not an effective way of training for a pro career.
Well, I think most people probably train like that at that level. Everybody was kind of training it that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I used to do as like an early coach. I'd have to go down to my coach in Nashville. I'd go down there and train with him like once a week. And I'd come back up and I'd use exactly what he was showing me. All right, cool. And I'd go back, try to go back there at least once or twice a week. Or what can you, once a week or sometimes every other week.
Yeah, I mean, remember like Sean Hammond's telling us about getting faxes on techniques and stuff, and what
way
to work
back in the day.
It's like faxes. Do you got to wait by the fax machine to get?
So back in the day, they would get a printed newsletter where it's like telling them what to do, and they get faxes from HQ sent to like because they were part of the Hicks and Gracie Association.
Yeah,
faxes being sent. Imagine trying to like disseminate jiu-jitsu knowledge from a damn fax.
Well, they were even like just how people learn now. Somebody had mentioned it was like on the Jiu-Jitsu forum. They talked about Marcelo Garcia is the book worth getting, and he's got like advanced Jiu-Jitsu techniques. One of his books, which I love.
I had one. I had
phenomenal.
several of his books. Yeah,
and they're like, is that worth it? And I'm like, well, he's doing an instructional now. You can just buy his like.
The books are fine. And honestly, any of that stuff kind of depends on you as a person.
Right. That's true.
It's like,
that's
are
true.
you going to use it? It's like, I mean, like you could buy whatever you want to. Doesn't mean you're gonna get anything with it. The book's not gonna do the work.
Right.
Right. It's like, are you gonna do it?
But it's just, I mean, there's just like, we have books, and then we've had books. Now it's like these videos, these instructionals are just phenomenal.
Google anything.
Google
and
anything.
find a
Yep.
technique for it. Yeah. We used to watch UFC fights, and we
That's
go,
right.
oh man, that's awesome. We need to go work that at the gym
Let me
tomorrow.
figure out how to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like,
That's so nuts.
Some of our game planning would go into that kind of stuff. Like I think in our fight, when you had taken me down, I'd threw a knee.
Okay.
I had you up the, and I'd used it in a fight before. I had you up the fence. I saw Josh Koscheck doing it in a fight. And, wrestler just throws me, right? Like, I'm like, okay, this is a guy I want to emulate and get to that level. So had him up against the fence. He pushes him, so there's that ricochet off the fence, and he just comes in with a knee to the body. Well, I'd done it in a previous fight, and I think I did it to you. Well, you caught my leg and took me down.
Okay.
But that was a technique that, like, I never would have came up with that on my own. I saw it on a UFC fight, like, 3 years prior, and had worked it through within my training, and that's kind of how it was. There was not YouTube.
Yeah. YouTube was in its infancy.
There's no database.
Oh man, it was so crazy because I remember when I first started training, before I even started jiu-jitsu, we were like, me and my buddies were watching fights, and then we were trying to mimic what they were doing. And I remember the can opener, right? Because I saw all the wrestlers doing can openers, Mark Coleman, Mark Kerr, all doing can openers. So I was trying to figure out what exactly the can opener was, and I was like, I thought they were squeezing the person's head. So I'm trying to like, like freaking like pro wrestling. We're gonna squeeze you, brother. Like just squeeze the head. I'm like, this isn't working. I'm like, what is this? And I went into my first jiu-jitsu class, and then they showed me how to actually use the can opener. I was like, oh, okay. It's just a different time, man. And I think it's fun because the thing that I think is interesting though about people that come from that generation, our generation, is that like the ones that like got into it, they're so resourceful because they didn't have much. Right, so it's almost like I'll give you a sort of parallel. It might not make any sense, but it will at the end. So we have kids that do little events here, right? And
like grappling tournaments or
no, like play things. So for the kids,
like a mom's night out.
Yeah, so basically the kids that grapple will do like come in. It's a big Nerf gun war, right? So back in 2012, we started doing these things, and I remember like I would just give the kids like whatever soft stuff that they could stack, and just give them some guns. And I mean, dude, it was like these kids were like building forts and everything else, and it was great. These kids, their imagination was running wild. One of the coaches about a year and a half ago, he comes in and you saw this sort of degrading of their ability to like put things together. One of the coaches, he came up with this idea. He's like, I'm going to get all this cardboard together. So he's stashing cardboard boxes for a month. We had the back office filled with cardboard. They put them in boxes, they tape them up, and they have them all ready for him. And then, like, us as coaches, we remember being a kid, a cardboard was whatever you want it to be. It could become armor, it could become swords, it could be a house, whatever you want it to be. Like, your imagination could run wild as you could just tear it up. So we like brought the kids in. We're like, all right, guys, here you go. And they're looking at it and they're like, what do you do with it? I'm like, well, you make stuff with it. And then one kid out of the bunch, out of like 30, starts ripping it together and then like has his armor set up. It looks like it's a space marine from like Starship Troopers. You know what I mean? It's like walking in armor with their like little gun, and all the kids are like, I want that. And then, they're just complaining because they can't have it. And I'm like, well, you do it. But I remember like watching one of the little kids, like all of a sudden, it's like almost like watching cavemen discover fire. One of them takes one of the boxes, and then they stack it on top of another box, and they go, "Oh, it's like Minecraft." And I was like, God. And I'm like, "Oh my God, the world is goners, right? We're all goners when they get old." But where I'm getting at with this is the kids that are younger, they didn't have as much like stimulation, so they had to be more resourceful for their entertainment. You just make stuff up, right? Now everybody's so desensitized with iPads and stuff. It's just like you're losing that strength in your mind, right? Yeah. And the people that came from like our generation and the generation before me, like Colin and Kyle, my coaches, like those dudes were like watching these grainy VHS tapes, and they would like, how do you put that move together? This is before instructionals came out, because then you could buy DVDs. Before DVDs came out, right? They just had like watching these grainy VHS tapes. And then like us, like again, you didn't really have YouTube. You didn't have instructionals. You didn't have nice gyms to train at. You didn't have adequate coaching. You just had to kind of deal with what you could, and you had to be very resourceful. And it's amazing that like, a lot of us got as good as we did because with what we had. And then the next generation comes and they have so much more at them, and you're like, dude, come on, it's right there. All you got to do is just show up, and you guys have it like just lined on a silver plate for you.
Yeah. But we talked about this. Sometimes it's just a little bit too much information. Like it's also difficult to disseminate. Like you have all this content.
Sure.
And you have to figure out what is useful, what is bullshit, what can you use, what's kind of McDojo type stuff, what doesn't work, and then what works for you as a, your body style or your style of jiu-jitsu.
And then that's when you just pick a direction and you just go with it.
Yeah.
Just pick a direction and stick with it for a while. Regardless if it's right or wrong, just see what happens.
It's so powerful though. Like just doing that, like finding one little thing. Like today, for example, I was just working on inside control and grips, and I use that a lot, in training, and just focusing on that and seeing what opened up. And so sometimes you have to focus on little minute details, minute things that can open up other things. So just discovering them. So
now here's a question for you: why did you stop fighting?
I got a real job. It actually worked out. So when I came out to Louisville to fight you, I came a week before the fight, and I stayed with a cousin who was living in Georgetown at the time. And so I did some training with Chris Griffin at his gym, and then just did my weight cut out there. And I had been putting in for departments in Illinois. And Illinois is really weird. Like they don't open eligibility or application process when they're hiring. They have to do it every 2 years. And so if they're not hiring, you get on a list, you might not hear back
2 years later.
Yeah, until 2 years later or 18 months or whatever it is. And so I was in Georgetown, and I knew I was getting 25, and that's like the age to where you're getting off your parents' insurance and all this stuff. And I wasn't making any money, and the gym was coming up to its 2-year lease, and I was like, I want to weigh out. I don't want to have to renew this. I'm not making any money. I'm putting too much effort into it. And so I applied with Lexington, just because my cousin was like, hey, Lexington is always hiring. Why don't you check them out? And I got hired on with Lexington.
Nice.
About 6 months later.
why'd you want to be a cop or police officer? What was the
So
pull?
I had originally wanted to do something like TV, like FBI or DEA or something like that. And I had these thoughts of like, I'm a business owner, and I got an education and a martial arts background and all this stuff. Like, why wouldn't they take me? Well, why wouldn't they want some young kid to come in here and with all this life experience that I thought I had at the time, which was basically nothing.
Every young person has the delusion, right? Yeah.
And so I had applied and I wouldn't even get a response back. Like they would just say, you're not eligible. You're not eligible yet. And so going down that line, I was like, well, maybe if I look into like local level, I could start off with that, build a resume, and then work my way up there. And then when I got hired on with Lexington, like I love my job. Like I have a great job. I work for a great department, and I can't picture myself doing anything else. Yeah. And so it just, that was my mind. Once I got hired on, I'm like, okay, I'm not leaving this. I might move throughout the department and do different things, but I'm not leaving this.
What did you love, like, specifically about, because so if people don't know, Lexington, Kentucky, it's where, like, UK, University of Kentucky is. So it's a small town, but it's a big college town.
So it's a small town compared to Louisville, but it's
in Kentucky, it's like, it's a
second,
second or third
so
biggest.
we got like 300,000, and so our police department's 600 plus. So it's a decent sized police department. And there's no like outside counties. Like Fayette County is just Lexington, so we're the major police department in the area, and it also intersects 64 and 75. Which, if you're gonna run drugs from Detroit to Atlanta, you're going through Kentucky or through Lexington. If you're gonna, and so like we get so many transplants from Chicago and Detroit and Memphis and Atlanta and all this stuff. So to where there's enough crime there to make it interesting to make it 600 officers be appropriate for the size of the town.
I gotcha.
And so it's small enough to where it's not a huge, so like I know almost everyone in the department. There's some guys that have been on for 20 years that hide in the corner that I probably don't know, but besides that, I know just about everyone on the department, but it's not small to where it's like this good old boy system. Like I can still do anything that I wanted to do in a big department. Like I can still go on a SWAT team, I can still be on a narcs team, I can still be like a gang unit or different things, and there's opportunity to promote, which I'm a sergeant now, so I've already stepped up once up the ladder, and it's small enough to where it's kind of like got that family feel still, but it's big enough to where I can do anything that I would want to do within the police world.
Yeah. So Now, let's talk a little bit about, when you moved to Lexington and you're a police officer, how did your training evolve, or like how did you continue your training with all that and jiu-jitsu and everything you've been doing? Because you're a brown belt, correct? Yeah. And you're still training, obviously. So like how did that work together?
I took 9-month academy, go through Lexington Police Academy. They do their own academy. So I took that whole time off. And then after that, you're like riding with someone on the street, and you're still not technically on your own, so you don't feel like you're a police officer yet. You still feel like a recruit, as we call it. And so like I didn't train for that whole time. I was so afraid of getting hurt and doing all this stuff. I didn't train at all. And then as soon as I got off on my own, I started training with Carlson Gracie, headquarters at Four Seasons, and with Mike O'Donnell. And I'd never done gi work or anything like that, so I went in, and the first day I showed up, I was like, hey, Mike, I fought here in Kentucky before. I got a background. Do you care if I stop in? And he met me at the door, and like we sparred like 10 MMA rounds. Like that's the first day of training in Kentucky for me.
Now, when you say spar, you mean like in the gi or in like with gloves on?
With gloves on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd never done any gi at that point. And then I had got hurt, severely hurt on duty, and it's not a great story. I fell off a bicycle.
Man, this is something like I was talking to, because we got several police officers, and there's something recently that one of them brought up that I've never thought about, and I'm sure this is going to be like, oh yeah, we deal with that. Like, before you fight, right? Before you get ready to go through this altercation where you were going to be like life and death, everything goes, right? What do you do before like an MMA fight?
Like the day of? You have a training camp?
Strategize? Like an hour before. What do you do?
Oh, I'm warming up.
Right.
I'm stretching.
Yeah. So a cop, like a police officer, they might be in a situation where all of a sudden they've got to go from being sitting in a car or at rest, all of a sudden, boom, I got to go.
Take off running.
And I'm like, bro, like, how are you guys not just blowing everything out?
Your hamstrings.
Oh my God, dude. Like, so like one of the big guys in here, he's like a giant big lifter, and he's super nice. He said, man, he was running, all of a sudden, he's like, shoot, hammy, pulled a hammy.
Hell yeah,
like,
dude.
Oh yeah.
Like, man, like
you're going from like sitting in a car, the shortened state, and then just like explode. Like you're going from the shortest muscle like situation to like extending it.
And you can't like like Tim, one of the other guys who was telling me about this thing that happened where he comes he's like basically saving this woman. Like this guy literally just beat his wife or his girlfriend or whatever, and it was a terrible situation, right? It was one of those moments where you're like, I'm glad I was there to do that, right? Like I'm glad that I was there to step in because it was one of those moments. But he was like, he had to basically bust the door down and kick it down, and it's not like you can go, and he ended up messing his leg up a little bit. He said, man, it's all tweaked. You can't say, hey, no, hold on a second, will you stop what you're doing? I need to stretch and warm up. Give me like 10 minutes. It's like it's something I never really thought about, but that's kind of it's a terrible thing to deal with.
Yeah, and like nowadays, just being the age that I am, if I'm going to train, I need to wake up an hour and a half earlier. I need to eat a good breakfast, like all this stuff. I need to be mentally prepared.
I need to go take a hot shower to warm up.
Exactly. And then the public kind of dictates when we enter this combat situation there, and it could be right after you just got done eating. You're free Chipotle you got that day.
So
like that,
as far as we talk, we've had some other guys, some other police officers we train with, and there's a resistance to training, to jiu-jitsu, to grappling. We've had Ruben Alvarez on the podcast. We've talked to him about how beneficial, because he's been on some videos of him just like diffusing situations through jiu-jitsu. This is kind of a two-part question, but really like, why do you feel like there's such a resistance to training? And then also like, you're a huge advocate for it. Why do you feel it's so beneficial?
So my mindset's kind of changed a little bit recently. So the easy answer is ego, right? Cops have these egos, but and they don't want them to get crushed by joining Derby City MMA, and a 16-year-old blue belt mops them up on the mat, right?
Sure.
That's the easy answer. I'm starting to move away from that answer a little bit. I think it's more comfortability, because there's so many cops that don't train, and I'm not going to say that every single cop if there's 20 of us training, that means there's 580 of us not. I'm not going to say those 580 just have these outrageous egos that can't be overcome. Right. So I think it's comfortability. That's one thing I can speak on from police, but I think it's probably society in general, but we don't want to work outside of our comfort zone, right? And so jiu-jitsu's outside of your comfort zone if you've never done it. If you've never done wrestling, or even if you have done wrestling, you show up to jiu-jitsu and you get mopped and you're not used to being mopped up and down the mats, that's going to put you out of your comfort zone. So there's a very small percentage of cops that they get put out of their comfort zone and see it as, I need to learn that so I'm not in that situation, or I need to learn that so I can get comfortable there. And you see it's the same thing for anything. They train the way they like to train.
Yeah.
They don't venture too far off of that. They do the things they like to do. They work the side of town that they like to town. If you put them on the other side of town, they're putting them out of their comfort zone, right? The mistakes that they make are because they're in situations that have put them out of their comfort zone. Sure. You just kind of see it escalate from that. And that's why I advocate for it so much. It's like, you're going to be outside your comfort zone, but you're going to work through it. And one thing that's going to do is it's going to build your mental toughness. I've been reading a lot lately since I became a supervisor in a leadership role. I've been reading a lot lately on kind of callousing the mind and building all these different things that you can through not so much being effective or working as hard as you can, but doing the same workout you always do, and you're going to be able to get through it, but doing something that you don't know how to do, or it's going to be tough for you, or you hated the day before, but you know what, I'm going to go back and do it tomorrow. Yeah. And so I think that kind of speaks to it the most, is like it puts them outside of their comfort zone. And it's not only is it outside your comfort zone, you're also getting smashed, and the ego part of it, you're getting broken.
Yeah, I think, the big thing about it is when people say the word ego, I think that, like, sometimes you have people that have these, ginormous egos and things like that, but sometimes it's like just a problem of relinquishing that ego when you walk in the door, because when you walk through the door, as you know, like, no one really cares what you do outside, as long as you're like, not like a pedophile or something like that. Nobody really cares, right? It's like, you know what I mean? We don't say we care obviously about some stuff, but most of the stuff we don't care. It's like, you work here and do this. I don't care. Like, someone could come up and say, you know what? I'm a CEO. I make this much money and I got this cool car. I don't care, And I think that a lot of times it's hard, because especially if you've gotten to a place in your life, because I've seen this even with, like, not even cops, but like athletes. If you were a good athlete at some other sport, it's a lot of times it's kind of hard for you to get into this place where, okay, you've got to let go of that cool person that you are out there to become this nobody in here. And it's like, you may not be a bad person. You're just like, I like being the person that everybody thinks is cool in those surroundings. And you see this even with jiu-jitsu practitioners, where, you'll see this with guard players. Like, they won't learn wrestling because they suck at wrestling, and it's just easier to pull guard. Or you'll see guys who are good at takedowns and top work, and they don't want to pull guard because they're like, I'm not good at it. I want to be where I'm good at, where I'm comfortable, right? And so you don't want to relinquish those areas where you're somebody or you're good at something. And you see this all over the place. There was something I was going to say and ask, but it's escaped me. So, yeah.
Well, so right now you guys have something called Blue Jitsu, which is a way to incorporate police officers in grappling and martial arts or jiu-jitsu. Tell us kind of how that started and what the goal of Blue Jitsu is.
So there's three of us. When I first started at the department, I was the only guy training. There's a couple guys that maybe had trained 7 or 8 years prior, maybe got their blue belt but gave it up. But I was the only guy that was actively. So I became like the MMA guy or the jiu-jitsu guy or whatever you want to call it. And so, like, there's a lot of attention on me. But as the sport grows and as, like, the movement to get jiu-jitsu incorporated, you'd see a lot more jiu-jitsu guys coming into the department. So Paul Hogan, who you both know, Paul Hogan got hired on with the department, and he's now he's a brown belt under Carlson Gracie team. And then Sam Ferguson got hired on probably 2 years after that, and Sam's now a black belt under Carlson Gracie. He used to be a teacher at Carlson Gracie headquarters. And so we all came, we're these jiu-jitsu guys that we're also cops, and we see a need for it out there. And there's a couple more guys. We're starting to build our team a little bit. And when I say team, I mean just number of officers training, just a little by little. But we're the main guys behind it. We're the guys with the most experience and been doing it for 10 plus years each. And so we got together and we're like, what can we do to get more officers doing this? And we're like, we should put on free seminars. Yeah. And just give them exposure to what jiu-jitsu is. Just give them law enforcement only. Yep. And we kind of mapped out the reasons why cops don't train,
and that's probably easier for them, because if they go into, people that are part of their fellow brotherhood, right? Because it is a brotherhood, right? You're in this brotherhood where, hey, you do what I do, and so you understand me. It's like in marketing, they talk about the fact that you might, let's say that it's the same, like, let's say, for instance, you got that cup. All right, well, this is a cup for anybody. Well, I've got this cup that's for fishermen, and it goes into the little, it's the same cup, but it just goes into, so it instantly, they will resonate with that. So again, saying, like, listen, it's jiu-jitsu, maybe some small differences, but it's jiu-jitsu, but I'm a cop too. I understand what you're going through, so that probably makes it much easier for those people to get into that situation, because they're like, where I'm coming from.
Sure. And that's kind of, we labeled it Blue Jitsu. So like if you see our logo, you know it's a cop thing. You know it's a jiu-jitsu thing. And so make it easy for them to understand, like, look, this is for you. This is for the police. And so we decided to do these seminars, and we came up with the name of Blue Jitsu. And so, and it really what it started as is just trying to get more officers just to train and just give them like the super introductory techniques and stuff that mostly sport but can apply on the street, or show you that there's benefits to this that you could use in situations on the street. And then we moved a little bit away from that, and we started developing our own curriculum. And it's something that we've actually finished the curriculum. We just need to put it in presentation form. We want to actually sell it to the police departments.
Oh, it's awesome.
Cool. And teach it.
It's like part of a training.
Yes. And it's all jiu-jitsu. Well, I wouldn't say all jiu-jitsu based. There's a lot of wrestling in it, just because the control between wrestling. Putting someone, takedowns are a huge thing for police. We don't want them to end up on our back. So if we can develop takedown defense and effective takedowns and things of that nature, and then, we incorporate a lot of Kimuras, or we call it double wrist lock. Just for the simplicity of them retaining that. But
yeah, it's funny. I talked to one of my students, no kidding, earlier today. He's a cop, and he's relatively new on the police force. He was in corrections before then he became a police officer, and he just had his first like altercation where he had to use jiu-jitsu, and he was like, man, he goes like he had to catch himself because it was just this intense situation, brand new, and again, you guys don't know, it's not a jiu-jitsu match. Right. You don't know if
didn't slap bump before.
Right, exactly. And you don't know if this guy might have a weapon on him. You have no clue. It's like, it's super intense. And he said that like, it was in the moment of like grappling with this guy that he realized that he was like, oh, I'm too stressed now. Took a breath, relaxed, got to mount. Okay, I'm good. Like, control the situation. And I was like, I thought it was cool because, again, I think that's one of the cool things that like the jiu-jitsu does give you is you get into these really uncomfortable positions and points where you realize that you're, you can feel it. Yeah. And you have the wherewithal. Like, I'm sure in a fight where you have to, all right, bring it down. Let's bring this back together and let's be, focus on what we're doing here. So I think it's a cool thing.
And one of the things I talk to someone every day about training jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
Like, I talk to another cop just about every day about, hey man, you need to be doing this. You need to be doing every day. And so I always get on these themes of why. And so my theme right now is like slowing everything down.
Sure.
Like you haven't been in this situation before. Everything's going to speed up and you're going to make mistakes and you go through it in the blink of an eye. Well, jiu-jitsu slows everything down. It's like you're entering the matrix.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of see everything. Tactical awareness is huge for us. Like, if I'm engaged in a fight, I need to know what you're doing, right?
Sure.
I need to know what this guy over here is doing. I need to know what's going on behind me. I need to know where my backup's coming from. I need to be able to communicate on the radio, all these different things. To whereas if you're not comfortable, you're just going to be all out energy trying to control this guy, not taking all those in considerations.
Sure.
And then not communicating, not talking, not understanding where your help's coming, or there's another bad guy around the corner, or there's someone over here that's videotaping me, and so you kind of enter that matrix because you've been there before. You've been in this tight, uncomfortable situation, and you've gone up against someone who's 10 times better than this guy, right? And you survived, and that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you sorry, I was thinking about this. What do you think about, because I get comments about people who question whether or not grappling is usable in a fight situation. Because for me, I've used it before. I've seen it used. I think you can watch numerous videos online being used. But as a person that obviously deals in real life, like, you actually have to use this stuff. It's not a theoretical thing.
Sure.
You actually use it. What would you say to someone if they said, "Man, that jiu-jitsu stuff, it just doesn't work. Like, it's not really usable for a fight"?
Well, I would offer them to try. And so one things that I have experiences with is I teach the recruits. And the recruits they're brand new guys that come in and they're fresh, and most of them don't have any experience. Some of them have dabbled, and every now and then I'll get a blue belt or a 4-stripe white belt that comes through the academy. But I fight these kids after have learned these techniques and drilled them for so much. I fight them in what we call a red man situation, where it's just a fight. It's a simulated scenario, but I'm attacking them. And so what I can show them, like, look, you have all these weapons on you. You know this is going to be a fight. You know all these things, and you know you have all these other opportunities to hit me, punch me, pull out your gun, pull out your taser, and just from my training and me being unarmed, and being restricted by this big suit that has my legs padded and my head's covered and all this stuff, I'm still able to control you. Oh, and you played football at UK and you got 50 pounds on me, right? Yeah. And so, like, that's what I would say to officers, because officers have never learned anything or are used to the old defensive tactics styles. It's like, you think you can get your gun out, but I can tell you, these recruits are trying to trying to get their guns out on me as I'm attacking them, and then aren't able to. They're trying to get their taser out. They're trying to get all these things. I can get their taser before they can. And so they have weapons on them. I know they have weapons, and I'm still able to utilize grappling techniques to control them, to put them in comfortable situations. So anyone that ever says that, I implore them to challenge it. If you want to challenge it, go right ahead. But I also put it out there like, would you rather have me, who's trained grappling all these years, to be your beat partner and your backup if you're getting into a fight, or you'd rather have this guy who's been through the academy and got 40 hours of defensive tactics training? Right. Like, which one would you rather have? Because if this doesn't work, then why don't you just take that guy?
So, Chris, a lot of the stuff, like that you talk about double wrist control, or, like Kimura grips, controlling weapons, controlling, like controlling arms, things like that, and takedowns. It seems like stuff that most white belts, should know how to do, a basic, takedown, double leg, something like that. How much training do you feel like you'd like to see brand new officers have never, I know you said 40 hours, but like honestly, like if they're coming in training jiu-jitsu on a regular basis, how much do you think would be effective?
I say to the level of a 2-stripe white belt.
So like maybe 6 months, 8 months, a year. I mean, everybody's different, but.
So I think it's to the level to where you're not the new guy on the mat anymore.
Okay.
Right? Because that's what society is. They're the new guy on the mat that just walked in day one. So if you can handle the new guy on the mat that just walked in day one, you're going to be able to handle the majority of society. Right. Now, I don't think you stop there. I think you work your way up as high as you can and be as confident in your skills as you can.
Right.
But I would argue a 2-stripe white belt, if you get them to 2-stripe white belt level, they will be able to control that situation over probably 95% of the other officers who aren't training.
Well, I think even a motivation for people that train is like, once you're not the new guy, that means you're not getting your ass kicked then it becomes
fun.
Yeah, then you're like, all right, now I can play. Now I can actually pull stuff off and do things.
That's the beauty of jiu-jitsu.
I know, it's awesome.
All you have to do is just keep going. All you have to do is keep showing up, and eventually you're not going to be the guy that's getting smashed every round. You might get smashed 90% of the rounds now, but at least that's that 10% you're winning.
Get something.
And then 3 months later, you're only getting smashed 80% of the rounds, and then all you have to do is keep showing up.
Yeah. And even like, people always talk about being motivated for jiu-jitsu, and it's just funny. Like it's sometimes not having the ability for me a bit, a motivator for me is because, and like you, I'm sure life's busy, right? You're working crazy hours. It's not easily accessible all the time. So I feel like for me being motivated, I can't train as much as I want to. So I always have that hunger to train. And it's,
but even like me, it's like, you think like I'm motivated to come in every single day. Like, I mean, I'm going to.
Yeah.
It's what I do, and I like what I do. I enjoy it, but I'm not like fired up every single day. Like I'm here though.
Sure.
But what's interesting is sometimes it's like those days where you're maybe not fired up. You come in and you train. Man, that was a great training session.
Yeah.
Then there's other days where you come in and you're fired up and it's like falls flat. And I think that's where discipline comes in. You do something regardless of whether you want to or not. You just do it because you want what you're going to get for it, right? Like, you don't go eat chocolate cake because maybe you don't want to gain pounds in your stomach. Chocolate cake would taste great, but, again, there's a reason why you're not going to do it. I'm not going to go get drunk every night during the week because I've got training to do.
Sure.
I might have a drink on the weekend or something, but I'm not going to do it during the week. I'm training. I have things to do, and it doesn't matter like what I want to do. It matters what the outcome I want.
Right.
It's far more important. I think maybe it's just that's where you have to look. If you want to develop discipline, you have to kind of look like be a little bit less short-sighted and look like what do you want? Like what do you want? 2 weeks from now, a month from now, like a year from now. What do you want?
Yeah.
And then sort of make that in alignment with where you're going.
Yeah.
So one of the books I've read recently is David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me.
Sure. Yeah, I've read that book.
Great. That's probably my favorite book I've ever read. But it's motivation versus being disciplined, right? Motivation goes away.
Sure.
But
spark.
Developing that discipline is what's important. And when we sat down and talked about developing Blue Jitsu, I probably weighed 225. I hadn't trained probably in a year. I'd taken a year off. We bought a house, all these different excuses that I could come up with, right? And I didn't want to go one day and then, I knew I wasn't able to do it for another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So like I had entered this, like my mind just kind of kept me out of training.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, if I'm going to preach this stuff, I need to live it.
Yeah.
And so developing those skills and things like that and developing those habits and just now if I can't train, because there's several times, I only train 3 or 4 days a week for an hour.
Yeah.
Only
but
3 or 4 days a week.
But
That's good. That's good, man.
Compared to some of the guys that are doing like without kids and without
You're also
responsibilities.
the problem is that you've touched on being a professional fighter who's training all the time. So if you're not training like every day, you're like I'm being lazy. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it's like,
and that's how I feel.
Yeah.
And
it's
what it used
a
to be
mind shit.
When I'm not able to train, now I find a way to work out on my own. Like before, it'd be like, I'm just gonna take it easier. I'm gonna do this other thing today. But now, like, okay, I can't train today. I have to eat good today, or I have to get this workout in, or I have to go run for a little while. So it's developing that mindset and kind of living it, because we're preaching it so much, and our presence on social media, like all these different cops are following us and seeing what we're doing. And if
walk the walk,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So have y'all gotten some? You had mentioned, we talked off the podcast that you guys got somebody to train with that was in town from a pretty
Zoltan Bathory.
So he is.
And he is the lead guitarist and founding member of Five Finger Death Punch.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know much about Zoltan or Five Finger Death Punch.
It's the craziest name ever,
Is
too.
it a real name?
He's from Hungary.
Okay, Hungary. Okay, that makes sense.
So,
I was thinking like some guy from
Zoltan.
Hail Zoltan. Isn't that like a cartoon or something?
I don't know.
Hail Zoltan.
it sounds like some Star Trek or something,
okay.
right? But so Five Finger Death Punch, and I'd heard some of their songs on the radio, and to be honest with you, they cover a lot of songs. I like the songs that they cover more than I like their songs. They're a better band now that I've kind of, been introduced to them a little bit deeper, and I support them wholeheartedly for what they've done for us. But they are very huge police advocates.
Okay, cool.
And just law enforcement, military in general, huge. And at this day of age, it's hard to take that stance, especially if you're trying to sell something or something like that.
What's that?
To like go out there and be the thin blue line advocates or military advocates, you know what I'm saying? Like, especially in the mainstream.
Yeah.
So you just, for most people, I mean, you think just because sometimes some of these altercations are kind of, on social media or kind of, they usually show some of the bad stuff because there's always bad eggs.
They
in
take
everything.
bait. There are shitty cops for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes when you look at some of these things, this is something I think most people have to really, they should be very careful about, is that the media, especially the mainstream media, has all the media. Let's not say mainstream media in general. Its job is to get you to pay attention with eyeballs.
Sure.
So you do this by starting stuff, right? So you'll say like, well, for instance, like there were a lot of situations where they would leave off chunks of the video, right? There was an altercation here in Louisville where these cops tased a guy, and they left a huge chunk of it off. What they left off was this guy had a giant like pole and was swinging it at everyone, and they're like telling the guy, put it down, put it down, put it down.
Yeah.
They left all that out, and they just showed this guy getting tased. And this poor guy. I'm like, well, wait a second, you guys did this. And so I think with the way our media is it's so, because it's a like most mainstream media, it's a dying thing, and so they'll post anything they can to sensationalize. Now there are bad police officers and bad calls. There's 100%, and I think that you should judge the situation individually. But then you got to make sure that you're careful, because when the media puts something out, you need to do your due diligence before you get all upset about something that they did on purpose, right? Like so they put this out there to get you upset so that you would think one way or the next. Do your due diligence and say like, well, let me look a little deeper into this before I start making a stance on someone or saying cops are all bad or, all these people are bad, because again, I think it's ridiculous. We're all citizens of the United States. We're all in this damn thing together. Like we should be trying to close the gaps, but people in power, and this is just my little small rant and I'll shut up. They work off of keeping people separate, because if you realize like, hey, we're all in this shit together. Right. Well then, okay, cool. Well then let's maybe like work together instead of like hating each other. It's a far better like policy. Sure. We'll be able to close the gap and compromise on things, right? So anyway, well, sorry man, I went off on a rant.
No, that's
I hate
all right.
that stuff.
But along those lines, like I'm very cynical, and I'm not a political person at all, but I always question motivation. So like, why are you taking this hard stance to support law enforcement? Is it for fans? Is it for record sales? Yep. Why is this politician shaking my hand every time I see him? Is it because he wants me to vote for him? Is it because he wants people to see that? Like I always have this skepticism about it. And so we got in contact with Zoltan, and he was playing at Rupp Arena, where UK plays in Lexington, the night before. And one of the officers, he's actually a J-Town PD officer, he reached out to us. He's like, hey, just so you know, I shared your flyer with Zoltan. He's a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and he's dating a Gracie, like a longtime relationship with Heather Gracie and like a huge advocate for police officers. So I just shared this with him. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, he responds. He's like, hey, we might be able to make that. Let me check with my schedule. And so it starts getting closer, and I don't know anything about them as much, but I'm all getting like, oh, a big time rock star,
sure,
come, possibly come. And I figured he probably would back out or not be able to come or whatever. And then Paul, the J-Town police officer, had reached out to him again and said, hey, just so you know, this is happening. We'd like to get you some shirts and just let us know what we can do for you. And he's like, yeah, we're going to be there. I'm bringing my crew with me.
Cool.
And so he shows up. He's wearing a boot, so he doesn't roll with us, but he brought his entourage with him. And his entourage is like, all of them are like high-level martial artists. His camera guy is a big Muay Thai guy. His head of security is a 3-stripe black belt with 17 years as a master combative instructor in the Army and all this stuff. And so just a cool group of guys. And like they didn't jump into our seminar. He's like, hey, man, I can't really roll. I'm just going to sit on the side here, and I'll watch you all. Don't put any attention on me. Don't do anything. And it's like, okay. So we go through our seminar, and at the end we do like a rolling at the end so different officers can roll with different people they never rolled with before. And their head of security jumps in and starts rolling with us. And he's a high-level guy, really good guy. And we had a lot of fun rolling with him. And then afterwards, he's like, okay, I can take pictures or whatever. He stays. The seminar gets over at 2:00. He stays until 3:30, just BSing with everyone. Like most down-to-earth guy. Like you would never know this guy was a millionaire rock star. Like you would never know it. He travels on these private jets and all this stuff. He's just hanging out, telling jiu-jitsu stories, talking about his judo days. He's a judo black belt, so he started showing judo techniques to a couple of guys that were interested in it, and like, talking like down to earth, really cool. And it's like that guy's genuine. I know. I can smell BS. This guy's a genuine guy. And just to kind of go off of that, they had a 5-finger death punch. They're, like I said, they're so big in police support. One of their members had to go off tour because of a back injury. Well, while he's off tour, he signed up to be a reserve police officer in Indiana. And like, these guys are legit. These guys truly do support the police and aren't just doing it for record sales or anything like that. And they're just genuine guys. And he was super cool. He gave me his number at the end. He's like, anytime I'm ever in town, let me know. I'll get you tickets to the show. I'll come out and train with you guys. Whatever I can do to help you all out. So.
It's nice to have that, though, like to have that other side. And I get it's sometimes not the most popular stance, of course, but it's necessary.
Especially mainstream. I would say more locally it is, but to go out there and put yourself out there.
Yeah, I think like in that sense, because I mean, obviously most people are, and gosh, I think it's even like when you talk to people, I think it's more vocal on like certain places and maybe social media, because man, most of the time you talk to people, and it's like, and most people don't hate cops. Like I mean, like I think some things that cops do I don't necessarily like I don't like traffic stuff. Like, I don't. It's like, it's like harassing citizens for a couple extra bucks. Like, whatever.
Like, like they're speeding, I guess.
Yeah, like you're going 10 over.
We're gonna ask Chris about giving us some tips to get out.
But
of tickets.
Wear your blue Jiu-Jitsu shirt.
Yeah.
Right.
Come on, man.
There you go.
But you talk to most people, and it's like, I mean, it's a different story. There's one guy years ago where, an acquaintance of mine, where he would post all of this nasty anti-cop stuff, very nasty stuff, and he used to train here. And I was like, I told him, I was like, look, bro, you got a lot of police officers, and they're good dudes. They're good dudes that like do their best to be good out there. And they're, a lot of them, like one of them, gosh, the guy like disarmed a guy with a knife because his partners had their guns drawn, and he's very like a very devout Christian. He was like, I didn't want that guy to die. And that's what it is. So he chose to go out and disarm this person's knife, and you're just, that's crazy, right? Good people, but he would post all this stuff. I found this kind of ironic because then his house got broken into, right? Who's he call? Right. Like he calls the people that he's like spending his whole time trashing. You know what I mean? And
sure.
And again, there's not faults. Everybody, like, I mean, doctors.
Nobody's perfect.
Doctors do terrible things and mess up. Police do terrible things and mess up, and some of them are not the nicest people, for sure. But it's just like, I think you need to judge the person, not necessarily and lump them all together with a giant body of people that generally 90% of them, 95% of them, whatever, are trying to do their best simply to do a good job of what they do, keep people safe, and then go home to see their families.
Yeah. And it's what they're exposed to. They're exposed to social media. They're not showing the cop that's working extra hours to solve this case.
Doesn't sell.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't catch eyeballs. Like I
popular.
mean, this is one of the reasons why I got rid of my TV when I was like 18, because I realized I was like, man, if I stop watching the news and stuff, I don't think the world's so terrible. You know what I mean? I swear, it's like I was telling someone else this day, it's like I don't watch news because I'm like, and I don't want to read news on mainstream thing because it's fear and consumption. Negative emotions are so much more powerful than positives. This is why, like, you have a million stories of good stuff going on and none of it gets posted, but this really bad thing happens and boom, it just like it gets you, because that's what we fear is much more powerful than like, oh, that was really cool, like that was really cool what that guy did, whatever.
Yeah.
Fear, oh, like then it grabs our attention on a different level.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like police officers, the guys that we train are phenomenal people, number one, but I think they're used to, the guys that we have here that train, they're so used to being in, kind of a high intensity environment consistently. So they're going to react more appropriately in that situation. Like you said, like we had a guy, that had to do a foot chase or whatever, and he was able to, calm himself down and take care of the situation without, somebody getting hurt or killed.
He gets in a position, he's like, oh crap, I've been here 100 times on the mats.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I had a guy, one of our guys ran. He's fought and everything else. He gets into an altercation on the street. This guy really goes after him, fights him. After they're done, Randy takes him to the hospital, and they're like sitting there together at the bed or whatever. The guy kind of comes to, and the guy apologized or whatever.
Yeah.
Randy dropped it down to, like, I guess it was like he could have charged him with like assaulting a police officer. He charged it down to like an AI or something, like something where it's not a big deal. He's like, look, man, just whatever, like just. Don't stop.
But Rando is like the chillest guy.
He's
ever.
the chillest dude in the world.
If you ever have a cop that comes to your door, you want him to be there because he's just like the nicest dude, and he's fought before, and he can hurt some people, and he just chooses to really be a good dude, and just protect people honestly, which is I think you're better able to do that.
I'm sure some of it's his personality, but some of it is.
I think it's his training. Yeah,
he's got the confidence. Like I don't know what kind of cop I would be had I not already been training for so many years.
You have nothing to prove either.
Right? No, nothing. And there's no one out there that I'm scared of. Like I can survive in my head. I can survive anyone out there.
Right.
Whether that's true or not, it's not. But I have that confidence. So like I don't get hyped up. If someone starts doing these, I'll notice the little movements or the clinching of the fit. I'll notice it, but I don't get hyped up. Well, if this guy makes a move, I know I can handle it.
I do want to know, Chris, like as far as how do you guys tailor your training? Do you guys do a lot of weapons kind of train, like with Blue Jitsu? Because you guys are going to be, we'll talk about, you guys have a seminar coming up.
Sure.
As far as like what you guys do to specifically train for that population, how do you guys switch up the jiu-jitsu?
So our seminar is not weapons training or anything. We really want it to be more focused on jiu-jitsu so that guys are like, oh, jiu-jitsu's awesome, I want to go train it.
Gotcha.
If we go in there and we put on gun belts and start doing weapon-specific stuff, they're going to look for a gym out there that has weapon. Winter, there's not many. Maybe you'll find a Krav gym or something like that. So we want to show them exactly what jiu-jitsu is.
Right.
Now, we'll take parts of our curriculum, and it's a lot of sports stuff that we're saying, okay, now here you got double wrist lock or Kimura.
Sure.
This is how you transition it to a. So you can do this for sport, and you can get the tap here, but now we want to make the arrest. This is how we're going to transition. This is the technique for that.
No,
so we
makes
just
sense.
try to intermingle the two and try to keep it more aligned with jiu-jitsu techniques.
What's the purpose of the seminar? Is it to get more cops, just more police officers engaged and
exposed?
And because I think that's a good idea. Because I feel like you're getting like people, like you said, the same environment. More police officers are like, hey man, you're a police officer. I am. We're kind of in the same thing. So you're with people of similar situation.
Yeah. And we're just trying to expose them to the sport.
Yeah.
One thing we do